Okay, hello, I'm Jeff Harold from the Lake County Art League, and I'm here with Ken Call, who is a watercolorist, and we're going to have a conversation with him. Ken, hello?
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Doing great today.
Okay, would you start off with just can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how your background in the art and how you get into it?
Okay, yeah, I'll try to give the quick version. I started as a young child. I did watercolors, and my mother actually kept some of them, and I still have can show people the very early watercolors I did when I was like 7, 8, 9. But I dabbled in watercolor for on and off through all through grade school and into high school, and
I
then
should
when
have
I had
asked
the
you for
chance to go
those.
to Yeah. And when I had a chance to get to go to art school, I was made sure I did some watercolors because the the instructor at the American Academy of Art, Irving Shapiro, was a very well-known watercolor. So he was my first teacher and influence. So yeah. But after art school, I went through became an illustrator. I was an illustrator for probably over 30 years. And whenever I had the chance, I always did some watercolors as part of my illustration. I did a lot of oil, did pretty much any kind of medium back then. But at one point during my career, the illustration business got slower and slower. So I decided I'm going to go more into fine art. So of course, I turned to watercolor because that was always my favorite medium and one I felt most comfortable with. So once I started doing commissioned portraits and then some more fine art and branching off into national exhibitions and up to today, I do pretty much only watercolor. It is the best
Yeah,
medium, if
yeah,
you ask me.
yeah. Why watercolor? Why do you like it so much?
Well, I don't know. It just kind of fits my personality. It's something you can do fairly quickly. You can get a quick result, and it's also very challenging at the same time. And it's just something that's gives really quick gratification with, or just the opposite sometimes where it doesn't work out. So yeah, so it's always a challenge, and yeah,
Okay.
so
All right. And one thing I've noticed in talking to artists is frequently they and their spouse are both artists. So is your wife into art also, or anything like that?
no,
Is
not at all. She's
no?
exactly opposite. She's just a what they call it, a right brain person. She's
Ah,
very good with numbers, very smart, intelligent, and organized. But over the years, she's got a better eye for art than she thinks she does because she's been around it. She goes to a lot of the exhibitions with myself, and she's always been my final say so. Whenever I do a finished painting, I show my wife, and she looks at it from the opposite point of view of an artist. She just looks at it as just a normal person,
yeah,
which is, most people when you go into like a gallery or a show, they're going to look at it from that point of view. So as artists, they spend
yeah.
all this time looking at something, and then you show something for the first time, like you would in an art show or something. And usually the first thing that she notices is, oh, why does this looks kind of funny here? Why is that there? So I
Yeah,
will always change whatever she says.
yeah, that's interesting because I've noticed in when I'm going to show, I like to be there, and I like it when I get a chance to actually talk about someone that's looking at my work.
Right.
Especially if it looks like they've been
Hmm.
talking about or something, because I want to see what they feel about, how that impacts them or what they think of it. So how do you
Sure.
meet your
Sure.
wife? If she's not an artist, how do you meet her?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I'll try to make it very quickly, but when I was younger, I had a big apartment, and this guy was coming into this where I was renting space, and he needed a place to stay, and uh, and he moved in, and he went out looking for his own apartment that day, and he came back and said, "Oh, I have a date with this young lady," And I said, oh, that's great. And then about a month later, he said, yeah, this Carrie, she has this a friend that she works with. I was wondering if you'd like to meet her. And I said, sure, why not? So we had drinks, met, about a group of about 6 or 8 people. And so basically it was a setup that I knew about and she didn't. So that's how we met. So we eventually started dating, and the rest is
Oh, that's
history.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay. All right. Let's get on to talking about your work. I know you've got a website out here, obviously. All right, and let's take a look at it here. And this is we're at your gallery here. So
Mm-hmm.
this is obviously your website address, which was on the previous screen, which we'll see again, is Call for Portraits. And you
Right.
seem to really be enjoying doing portraits and people, and I see more of that on here than anything else as far as like landscapes or what have you.
Right.
Is that a preference of yours, or you just like painting people? I mean,
Well, both. But once I started doing competitions, I just decided I'm gonna like stick with doing figures because um, it's it, it's just something I was more comfortable with. I thought I was better at it, and it's easier for an artist to stand out with something they're really if you're more inspired with one subject matter or the other, you're going to put more of your heart and soul into it. So that's why I always stuck with people.
that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
And I notice on here you also have a comment here. The only thing that comes to mind is the play of sunlight indoors and out, which defines and creates the mood. And you say that that's lighting is one of the things that inspires you.
Right,
Uh, and that's sort of interesting because for photographers, that really is essential to find that lighting. If you're doing painting or whether medium you have in painting, watercolor, pastel, whatever, you have a chance to change that lighting and define it the way you want it. If you're doing straight
sure,
photography like landscapes, what have you, you gotta be out there and find the correct lighting. So, and I think that's one thing that inspires a lot of photographers too. Is just
right,
the
right,
fun of finding that perfect lighting for the sunlight or the landscape or whatever.
sure.
But yeah, you these are very nice, excellent portraits here. And we're going to look at a couple real quick that I have pulled out here. And you do have a
Okay.
couple landscapes in here. So if anyone wants to visit the website, it's just callforportraits.com, right?
Yes,
Is that true? Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The lighting
And
is something that.
lighting is something.
Yeah,
Did
I
you?
wasn't sure if you were going to say something.
Oh
Sorry.
no, no, no.
Yeah, I
Go
mean,
ahead. That's
if
fine.
you're walking around, or just you, it's that's what catches your eye in the first place. These dramatic lighting situations. That's what draws you into something in the beginning, anyway. So
Yeah.
that's why it's. So if that's your initial inspiration, that's what you really want to show in your painting. So that's why that's my one of my statements.
Okay. And then this section of your website is portraits, and these are actually portraits. Now you do a lot of commission work, right?
I have in the past. I don't do as much as I used to, but yes, at one point I did a lot of portraits. I think maybe I ran out of people to do in my neighborhood here. So a lot of them are like friends or family members or people that went to our church, and then you get some word of mouth. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it's much different doing the family portraits. It's not really it's not fine art to me. It's not nearly as gratifying as doing something that you were inspired to do in the first place. it's kind of coming from a different direction. You're trying to achieve someone else's inspiration, just and then do it just for someone else. It's a lot different when you're uh, when you're doing something for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I looking at this, there are a couple pictures, and I had you send me some pictures of the work because it's a little bit small on your website, and I like to sort of look a little bit closer at some of your work here.
Sure.
And I'm gonna pull this guy up right here. This is one that I found really interesting and attractive, uh, and I noticed this as far as the way you use the watercolors. And every artist obviously has their own style of painting, and whether it's in watercolor, oil, or whatever. But I sort of I like the way you do like the background and the watercolor. Some of that has hard edges to it, okay, which is a result of watercolor. Uh, did you is this something that just comes natural to you? This style of using the watercolors, using the paints? Or is this something that you
Yeah,
developed and worked into over the years?
yeah, yeah, I find it comfortable. I try to have some looseness to it and some, get tight in some places and loose in others. Because I
Yeah,
always want to make my paintings when, in the end, to obviously it's a watercolor. So
yeah,
I always try to find some place where you can just see, the pure, you know, delicacy of the watercolor doing what it likes to do. And then in other places you can get, a little bit tighter, which is more of your center of interest. And as far as the backgrounds go, it's always the backgrounds are always something. Whatever's there is to enhance your center of interest. So that's why on this painting, on the side that she's facing, her light side, that's why all the darks are on that side. So
yeah,
you keep your center of interest and your eye where you want the artist to look at. And then everything else was the eye goes around. You're supposed to be, just gradually go around the painting, and then you're always gonna come back to the center of interest. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's surprising how much that whole concept of that you're talking about applies to the other mediums into photography. I mean, that's one of the things with
sure,
photography. You try to make in many cases, unless you're doing a landscape, something like that, you try to make a very soft background, a blurry, quite like out of focus background, so that your subject is sharp, and you get the same sort of effect that you're shooting for, and you get here in your
right.
work here. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
anyone that any of the artists of the past that influenced you?
Oh, sure. There's been many artists that have. I mean, back in the art school, when I was first exposed to there, I just loved John Singer Sargent's work. Even though he did oil, he did them a loose enough style that he had the same type of feel to it. And he also did watercolors too, which was very
Yeah,
impressive. And Richard Schmidt was the same way, and he was an oil painter who dabbled in watercolors also. And of course, Irving Shapiro, and then one of my main influences was an illustrator named Bart Forbes. He did a lot of his work in watercolor. So I kind of, in the beginning, kind of fashioned my way. I painted after his work, but as I got through the years, I tried to get a little looser and more, get a little more artsy look to it.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I understand what you're saying about Sargent. I also when I looked at yours and I went back and I looked at a couple of some of Winslow Homer's. And I saw some of the same styles or techniques that you're using in there too. It's uh, just the way you're handling the watercolors. It's similar to the way that he did a lot of his too. So,
Oh, well, thank you. I didn't
hey,
consciously do that, but
oh,
that's a nice, very nice compliment.
yeah, I know it's one of those things that a lot of people artists don't do something consciously necessarily, Sometimes it's an unconscious influence, and sometimes it's just the natural, just the way they want to paint. And it just goes
Sure,
back
sure,
to you can match it to other painters back, in history through time, or even current ones, what have you. Uh,
right.
so it's interesting that you see those things, and you can see those things. So yeah, and you had another one, and I sort of I like this. This is an adorable little child uh, with the teddy bear and everything, and I think this is again showing exactly what you were talking about with the way you handled the background as opposed to the main subject there. So
Right.
do
Exactly.
you?
Yeah,
Uh,
both of these paintings, the subject and the background were never together at the same time. I took a picture of a person and I searched for a particular background that would fit that.
yeah,
So,
yeah. How do you? What sort of process do you do as far as coming up with a color scheme? Because it's interesting the colors that you're using, to me, anyways, and it's I don't know what to say. It's like they're all in the same like color range, what have you, uh, but it's just a real I want to say kaleidoscope effect almost. I mean, it's just colors. They all match well together. They go together well. Is there some process that
thank
you
you.
go through as far as deciding what sort of colors you're using, or is this just something that whatever you feel like the painting deserves, that's what you use?
Well, it's hard to say because I mean, I'll start by what I see in front of me, and if it's something that's pleasing in the beginning and what I already have, I will go from there. I tend to add a lot of color into my shadows because I don't like just plain grayish dark shadows. I always like to get some
Yeah.
color into it.
Oh yeah,
So
looks
I
good.
always try to exaggerate the color a little bit because you can always mute it back in places if it's too bright, but you can never come back and make it brighter or cleaner. So
Yeah.
so once your painting gets to a pleasing point and you think that you can't, there's nothing else that you can do that's going to make what you want to show better, then that's when you know your painting's finished.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you made this one better, so it looks good. As do everything you're doing here. So, all
Thank
right,
you.
and then there was one more here. Uh, this is the one I had you send me, and this is one that it again. This is where I was going with the Winslow Homer because some especially some areas in the foreground. It's I can look at some of Homer's pictures and they you see the same effect,
Oh,
and it's just and what's interesting to me about this one is you've got it looks like you got the watercolor being handled one way in the foreground and more of a wash in the background.
mm-hmm.
And is what's you obviously did that intentionally. Okay, was that in order to have a little bit more detail or something like that in the foreground?
Yes, you always want to have more of your darks in detail in the foreground, and as something to show distance and in your painting. You always want to get like softer edges and more muted colors as it recedes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus this painting in particular is a was a was, I only used two different colors.
Oh,
It was
really?
Payne's gray and burnt sienna. So that's to keep the mood of the day where you limit your colors, and then doing that, and then it keeps oh then you can make sure that everything they're going to go together because you're only using two colors,
Yeah.
and so you get a better, really good color cohesion in your paintings.
Yeah. Do you do that very often? Do a limited color palette like that?
Not very often. It depends to show a certain time of day or whatever. Just whatever that that picture needs, that kind of determines your color palette and the value you're going to use.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if you have if we have time. There's a quite a little story that goes to this painting. If we have time,
Oh, sure. Go
I can
ahead.
you say sure. Okay. So this I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to put it on the screen. I hope you can see it. Can you see it?
Hang on here a second. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Now it looks very similar.
Yes, it
This is
does.
a painting. This is a painting I did in art school.
Oh.
I did in art school probably in like 1978 or so, and it was supposed to be a two-color study for an assignment in our watercolor class with Mr. Shapiro, and the assignment was due the next day, and the day before I didn't have any reference pictures, so I borrowed it from someone else, and I quickly drew it up and painted it, and I got it all done, and I handed it in class. We were going to have a critique the next day, so he put everybody's paintings out, and he put mine up first, and he sat there and he looked at it for about 2 minutes, and then he announced to the class uh, um, he wanted to explain how not to do a watercolor, and he just totally like ripped everything about it that I did. And what happened was I just took this photograph and I drew it exactly the way I saw it, and
Yeah.
I didn't change anything. I didn't put any thought into the process besides the painting part. The
Yeah.
painting part was great, but put together, I had all these tangents and all this stuff, and I really learned a valuable lesson. It's one of my main turning points in my art was how to prepare before you actually paint. And I
Yeah.
learned all that from this one assignment in this painting. And I remember that what he said for years and years. And then later on, when I got back to being more doing my fine art again, I decided, you know what, I'm going to redo that painting, change everything he told me, and that's the painting that you see now before the new one.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
Okay, so you said that uh, one thing you learned from that was to prepare for the painting before you start.
Right. I mean, I
Okay,
didn't
what do
think
you?
about the composition or
Okay,
anything. So,
okay, yeah. What all do you think about as you're preparing for a painting?
well, first of all, you gotta look at it as an overall design and a composition, and know beforehand what you want to emphasize, what you want to like, you know, put in the background, that type of thing. So, yeah. And then you got to think about where things are and where they go in your picture. So when you look at it, I mean, you can have something painted the best painting anybody could possibly do, but if things are in the wrong place and they cause your eye to do something that you don't want it to do, then
Yeah,
yeah, then
it's
there's a
it's
problem with it.
yeah, it's interesting because uh, well, one of the things I teach in my photography class is actually the first thing, the first day, is something that Ansel Adams wrote, who was a famous photographer back in the early first half
Sure.
of the 20th century. And one of the things he always said is I can teach you how to do a correct exposure for a picture. I can teach you how to develop that film, how to print it to bring out contrast, etc., etc. I can teach you the technical stuff. The rest of it is your own vision, and you
Right.
have to pre-visualize or visualize the final result before you even, you know, do anything. All right, and that's
Exactly.
usually, and it's the same concept in. I see this. I've heard this from several other artists too. Is you sort of have to think about it first, as far as what do I want in it, where do I want where do I want what,
Sure.
and your composition, like you say, what have you. But that concept applies to just every form of art that you can think of, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
So okay, so tell me what your art instructor would have said about this one.
About this one,
Yes.
well,
What do you think he would have said?
I think he would have liked it. I changed. I got rid of all the tangents that I could, and and it's much better painted. I got a lot more of value changes in the shadows than the
Yeah,
first one. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's a larger piece also.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's a very good piece. I like it.
thank you.
Okay. Let's go back and see what we got here on your website again. I gotta get back here where I can control it. Uh, all right. Uh, you have your gallery. We've looked at that. You got the portraits. This one I am not going to even try to read. Okay, your list of awards is just goes on and on and on and on. So obviously you're doing something right.
Well, thank you.
All right. If anyone wants to go out there and look at that, look at your awards, it's very impressive. So, all right.
Yeah, I need to update it. I kind of slow. I'm very slow on updating my website, so it's a few years behind. But
Oh, I haven't updated mine since before the pandemic, so
yeah,
I'm I'm right there with you. All right. Okay. So, anything you want to talk about? What I would like to do is if you can give us a few tips, maybe for artists in general, as far as how to approach their work and become more successful in the art that they're doing.
well, the main thing is to go to what inspires you. I mean, don't paint just because someone says, "Well, you should do this or you should paint that." You might have more success. If uh, every artist will know what they want to paint, and that's what's going to give them their inspiration. Because if you don't have that in the beginning, then it's not going to show through in the end for your paintings. So that's my main advice.
I'm laughing
And as far
because
as the
I said I'm laughing because I I talked to Tom Troush and he started off with the same thing.
right,
Paint what inspires you.
right, exactly, yeah.
So what else?
That's what we were told when we were younger too. So
Yeah. Okay. It's always good advice.
yeah,
So what else? You
yeah.
started something else. I interrupted you. Sorry about that.
Oh, I would, and as far as the actual painting process is, not to be afraid to make mistakes. Because watercolor just takes a long time to master, and the essence of the meeting of the medium, I should say, is that you can do, something very quickly. You can have success very quickly, or you can have not success very quickly, but just to keep doing it and work on it, and not be afraid to take chances and be bold. So that's my advice for the
Okay.
actual painting process.
You and Tom got together on this, I swear. Because he said the same thing. But I can't just say that about Tom. I've heard this from other artists too that have been very
Sure, sure.
successful, and that's
Well, that's because
an
it's
important
true.
thing for any medium you're doing. So
Exactly.
okay, well, what do you got coming up? Shows, workshops, anything like that? I know you got
Yeah,
one coming
I
up
got
in a couple of weeks for us, a demo you're doing. So
right. Yeah, April 17th, I believe, Monday
yep,
evening. I'm looking forward to that.
yep,
Um,
Libertyville Civic Center.
right, right. And uh, a week or so after that, I'm going to be in Tennessee for a workshop, and that weekend, like I mentioned before, I'm going to go into the AWS show, the awards dinner and exhibition in New York City on April 28th.
Oh,
Yeah, so that'll be good. I'll see a lot of people there, and I was lucky enough to get a nice award this year, so
ah,
I always like to
very
go.
good.
It's not too often. It's a very hard show to get into, so
So
it's something that
what was the award?
I forget the name. The name of it. It was I should have wrote it down beforehand, but it was a very nice award.
Okay,
Yeah,
name
yeah.
doesn't
And then
matter. It's
yeah,
you're recognized for something that you did and you do
right.
extremely well. So.
Yeah. And I got a
So
couple
that's good.
workshops in the fall in October. One in Houston and one in Central New York.
Okay.
Central New York Watercolor Society, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
So I
Well,
try to do about 4 to 6 workshops a year, kind of space them out. I always want to make sure I leave myself enough time to do my own art.
yeah.
So, but it's fun to do workshops, travel around, meet other people, and
Okay.
yeah, it's always nice.
Well, I'll have to
And
talk
plus,
to our I'll have to talk to our workshop guy and see if maybe he can talk you into doing one for us sometime here.
sure, why not? It's nice and close.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything
And
else?
for anybody who's interested, I do the one I mentioned before. I don't really keep my website up to date, but I do try to keep the workshops up to date. So if anybody really is interested, I would they would can go to my website and check where the workshops will be.
Okay. All right. I was just going to go ahead and let's switch back real quick to your to your website here. All right. And
I
you
hope
can
it's up to
see
date.
these are his workshops, and yeah, well, you're not the only one not up to date, so don't feel bad.
Yeah.
Again, I've talked to other artists, and Tom actually lost the guy that does his updates at least for a while. So,
Uh,
uh, but yeah, so these are he's got a March 2023. You got your April workshop, and then I see this one down in Houston for October. And then
yes.
you got the New York one in Hartford, uh, and then another one down in Texas.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you've already got a pretty busy schedule here for 2023.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to keep them up. There's I even have some scheduled for 25 and 26 already. They always try to
Wow.
do them well in advance. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hold 24 open for us. I'll I'll talk to Jim who does our workshops for us, and we'll see if he can get next year in it. It's the 90th anniversary for the Lake County Art League next year. So we're
Oh,
going to
cool.
try and plan a number of events and workshops in conjunction with that celebration. So, okay. Anything else you want to throw in while we're here?
Well, I'm not that going to think of at the moment.
Okay.
Just that anybody who's watching, who's hopefully watching this, will give someone a little bit of inspiration to go out and do some painting. That's
Yep.
always a good thing.
Yep. No matter how good you are, you go out and paint. I had a my aunt was a better painter than she thought she was, but she was 99 when she passed away, and she was still painting that year.
Wow,
So
that's impressive.
it was yeah, it's something that you do. She did it because she just enjoyed doing it, and that was
Right?
it.
Yeah,
So
that's what
so
can keep you going.
oh yeah, keep your
I
mind
always
active.
tell everybody that's the uh, art is the only thing I'm really good at. So that's what I just keep doing it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, definitely. So okay, well, thank you for giving me the time to talk to you. Uh, and
thank you.
we will see you in on the 17th when you do the demo for us. All right, and that's it. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and look forward
Okay,
to the demo.
great. Bye.